really in the 70s when I started going to sprint car and midget races with my dad and my grandfather. So Mel, Tom Bigelow, Rich Folk, Sleepy Trip, Poncho Carter, Kenny Schrader was running midgets then. And at that time, a lot of them were Volkswagen powered, actually, Type 1 B engines. And man, that was fun.
Well, that's like so we were at the shop one day, and they had this Volkswagen sitting on the bench. And this is in 2001, 2002. Nobody outside of Speedrome or indoor, in Fort Wayne and stuff, you're not running a Volkswagen. And Don said that was a Volkswagen Autocraft. And Autocraft they were from Ohio. And it had the most torque and most horsepower they ever were able to build for the Canyons. It was like a $20,000 Volkswagen air-cooled, engine for back then. Then I'm talking like mid ’80s. So that's
it's
a lot
crazy.
Of money. And he goes, it cranked out insane amount of horsepower.
Autocraft machine was in California, and they did the heads for my dad's Type 1 Beetle that ran in council.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so Dad met them, awesome. Vogler, and we'd go to all the midget races, and all the people from Autocraft Machine were at the midget races as well.
Well, I don't know if you knew this, but I went to the Eleanor Vogler Scholarship Fund when I was down in Indy.
No way.
I was talking with her, and Eleanor's like, well, we used to live in Glen Ellen for a while.
Yes,
like, what are you talking about?
On North Avenue.
He went to Glenbard North High School, I think.
Yes.
And
right.
I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that. And there's a lot. And then Bobby Rahal grew up in Glen Ellen, so there's a lot.
So I went to Glenbard West, and Bobby and I became good friends because of that. And team is the team holding the sponsor summit Wednesday and Thursday. So I'll be speaking on the panel as representing IMSA. So.
Yeah, it's crazy. This little enclave up here of like 5 towns of all the people that came out of it that did different forms of racing. So
that's right.
That's pretty cool. But are you actually recording, Brandon? I didn't even think about
you guys started getting into it, and I was like, this is good. I better start recording.
I hope so. But
like I said, we're going to do the intro going further on. So
right. I'll do the intro further on, John. But it's nice. So we'll start. I'll just, everybody, welcome to Midwest Council Podcast, Episode 5. We have a very special guest with us, John Doonan, President of IMSA, and who has family connections to Midwestern Council. And we are a go. So welcome, Mr. Doonan.
Well, thanks for having me. And as I said, when you mentioned this, when David Wessel mentioned this, I'm absolutely honored to have the opportunity to talk with you guys, talk a little bit about Midwestern Council, talk about the beginnings, because I've said a number of times, I said it at the Midwest Council banquet when I had the opportunity in 2019 to be part of that program, that I would not have the opportunities that I have today in my role at IMSA or in my previous role at Mazda without the growth and the opportunity to earn and understand the sport because of Midwestern Council. So I want to do everything I can to give back, not just with words, but with participation as much as I can, because I'll never forget the days at Blackhawk and Road America and Groton and Milwaukee State Fair Park and all the great places that Midwestern Council visited when my dad started in the early 70s.
Well, we really appreciate that. And as you know, we want to build a connection to the past to preserve and archive all of our old information. And this is just the start of this process. Speaking of that, with your father, how did your family get involved in council? Like, how did all this happen?
Well, it's my grandfather was racing circle track in the 40s and 50s. And my dad's uncles were all car guys, and so they were tinkering and primarily sports cars, but primarily circle track. But my dad was in the service, and he was actually stationed out in Long Beach, California for a while, and got his first driver's school under his belt in a Formula V, a formed car, Formula V, out there in in California when they were running at places like Holtville and airport circuits and things like that. But Dad, his first civilian job after being at Great Lakes Naval Air Station in Glenview was at the Board of Trade. And downtown Chicago, Board of Trade is right next to the Federal Reserve Bank. And my mom worked at the Federal Reserve Bank, and her window and my dad's window were across from one another. And the girls in Mom's office put her phone number up, and my dad called her, and they ended up going on a few dates. Well, one of those dates was a Sunday drive out to this sports car group out at Blackhawk Farms. So they drove out to Blackhawk, lo and behold, visited, and Dad was keen to keep racing. And so that was in the early 70s. Dad did a bunch of autocrossing, parking lot, pylon chasing, autocrossing with, and of nothing, believe it or not, a dune buggy. He had what was called the Lobo chassis, El Lobo chassis, with a Type 1 Volkswagen power plant. And so he ran all of the autocrossing events in and around Chicago, down into Kankakee and Bourbonnais and those areas. But really, he wanted to go road racing again. And so ended up going through driver school for the first time in council in 1974 in that Lobo dune buggy, believe it or not, in a class that was called B Sports Racer at the time. And believe it or not, that group ran with all the big bore cars, the Corvettes and Camaros and Porsches. And he won the 1974 B Sports Racing class championship in that Lobo dune buggy. He was a brave guy. It all started with a Sunday drive out to Blackhawk Farms. And a few weeks ago, I had the chance to do that drive again. And it was very special to be there after not being there for 20 years, I hate to admit.
Oh, no,
Quite different then, huh?
Yeah, it's very different. But yeah, that's when we were introduced. And you were telling me then you found this car, correct?
Yeah, so found the Lobo dune buggy out in Kansas. So going to try to reunite with that car and take it back to the original Midwest Council specifications that it ran in 1974, which was really, again, he was brave, sitting up so high in the car, and it was all basically, it's a fiberglass body sitting on top of a Volkswagen chassis. So that was that. And then, that winter of 74, a young woman broke down in front of our house in her Volkswagen Beetle, and she knocked on the door and asked to use the phone. Lo and behold, the car had dropped a valve, and Dad said, well, I know some things about cars. And she said, I can help you fix it. And the young woman said, I just want to sell it. So Dad bought the Volkswagen Beetle for $150 on the spot. And it went into the garage, and over the winter of 74 into 75, Dad built that Beetle into a road racer. And so that car, just been reunited with that car at Blackhawk Farms, and it's going to get restored to that original 1975 spec. So just so much really unique history. And you look at the cars, that's one thing, but I think what is so meaningful are the people along the way, the relationships of people that we met through Midwest Council, guys that I still to this day stay in touch with. They follow what I'm doing in IMSA, and I follow what they're doing in council or what they're doing as a prep shop. And the things that you learned from those people, you never forget, but the relationships and the people are what really make it all so special.
Oh yeah, very, very true. I mean, Brandon and I talk about that all the time.
Mhm.
It's all the society, and it's all the people you you run across. I took a motorsports break for a couple of years, and I wasn't the racing I missed the people. I missed going to
Yeah,
the track, hanging
that's
out,
right.
having fun, communicating with everybody. So I'm on board with that. So given this, so there's one thing I did want to ask real quick, and
Sure.
Brandon's going to help me with this, is that I was unable to make our 60th anniversary banquet,
Yeah,
but Brandon was there, and there's a story of you when you were a little kid
yeah.
at a council event. Can you share with us what that was all about? Or
So Brandon, remember which story it was specifically?
Yeah, it was you got grounded for not doing your homework.
Yeah. So it was fourth grade, and unfortunately, I had gotten in trouble for a science lab that I didn't do, and so we were going racing that weekend. So the plan was that I would be able to go to the racetrack, but I would have to be in the car, sitting in the car all weekend until my homework was finished. Well, what I did all those years was I had a clipboard, which I still have the original clipboard with a old-fashioned stopwatch, circular analog dial stopwatch. And so the place we were gridded, instead of the garages where we were pitted, that are basically when you come in off of turn 5, that access road, that all used to be grass. And so we were pitted in that area, and I could sit in the car and see the cars going through turn 5. And so despite doing my homework, on one hand, I had my clipboard and I had my stopwatch, and I could see and had a perfect landmark to continue to take lap times when the cars were out on track. So I don't think my mom knew that story until I told it that night at the banquet. She was my date that night, and we laughed about that on the way home.
Yeah, I think everyone really enjoyed that story.
now, I was talking with Larry Best, who, as you know, is from Chicagoland Sports Car Club, friend of ours, and he was kind of giving me some insight too of when you were coming up through council, that your dad used to take you to the meetings, and the meetings weren't like they are today, of course. He was telling me you had to go up to Wisconsin. Now, if it was you had to go to Sheboygan.
It's crazy.
How was it back then?
It was so amazing. The good news is they were on Thursday nights, and so Fridays at school were, still had to go to school, but they were in Burlington, Wisconsin for many years. It was called the Contest Board, and Dad would pick me up he would get home from work, pick me up, and we'd drive straight up there for the Contest Board meeting. And, he was the chief steward of North Suburban for many years. Then he was the chief instructor for council. I think he was vice president of council for years as well. But those meetings, they took place at a restaurant or a bar or whatever. But honestly, for whatever reason, from the time I was probably 7 or 8 years old, I sat there and took notes. And I wish I had all those notes, but the things you learned about why cars were classified in a certain way, why and how the business was run, that it was actually, there was a financial model of entry fees and track rental and things that now I'm doing in my role at IMSA. There was a lot to be learned there. And I think the other thing, back to the people side of it, is there was a lot of time in the car with just Dad and I, and a lot of advice came to me through those car rides and listening to the other leadership of the council clubs. And there's something specific that I think everybody probably already felt it, but knows it from racing, is my dad told me one night that, hey, son, if something ever happens to me, there's going to be a group of people that show up on the doorstep. They're going to be the first people on the doorstep to offer help to your mom and your sister and you. And he said, I'm telling you, son, most of them will be people that are in that meeting or people from racing. And without question, the morning after Dad passed away in 1993, guy like Ron Petrucci, who's been many years in council, a guy named Hugo Hugger showed up at the doorstep and asked how they could help in the situation. And, not to be too, sentimental and emotional, that to me defines racing and the kind of family that exists in racing. And my hope is that, people that are looking at participating in Midwestern Council understand that type of family atmosphere that exists, and remember vividly the days where there were announcements from, we called it from the bridge, attention in the paddock, car number 64 needs a front spindle. If anybody in the paddock has one, please report to the bridge or whatever. And it was about people making sure that their competitors could run, even if it meant giving them a part that ended up beating them on track. It was that kind of camaraderie that I think our sport is built on. And I think you and I talked about this, Mike, in an email, is those are the kinds of traditions that we want people to understand. But I also think we got to talk about what the future looks like. And I think the two are tied together.
Oh, for sure. I like you and I talked about, I agree with that. And you have to know where you've been to know where you're going in some respects. And that's the key part of council, that even Brandon and I and David Wessel and other people, a lot of them don't want that to be lost. We don't want to lose the family togetherness and the society, aspect. And it's like any other family. So you're going to have some cousins that rub you wrong sometimes here and there and whatnot. But in the end, you all got to break bread together at some point, just, work it out and work together. And and out of all the different organizations I've raced with, like you, from the little mini indies at Rockford Speedway to USAC and other organizations, this is the most family oriented in many different aspects. Not just families are out there watching, like the little kids are like you're used to be watching their dads go around, but family togetherness of like, okay, we got to get together and work through this. So I agree, and I think that's what makes council the best, in my opinion. And Brandon and I want to show people that, but when you're here, it's not just to gild the clubs. It's a lot more than that.
And then that's how I feel too. Like I came on kind of late. Like I'd always been in the cars, but until I finally got my own car and started coming out in 2016, when I finally started in council, a couple of years later, I'm the president of Great Lakes. And then, the Wessels practically adopted me and Daryl helped me get on track and coached me up and all that. And, just a few months ago, I helped David move. So, really just pulled right into
we're all, Brandon touched on it. We're all connected through a common passion for, automobiles, certainly for racing. I think in the auto industry, one of the challenges the industry has is, there is a different approach by young people. They have different freedoms with, mobile devices and things like that. So I think all of us were probably first in line to get our driver's license when it was 16 years old, and it was time. And then I think we have a duty, if you will, as stewards of the sport, to make sure that the next generation is introduced to our sport and still retains that passion for the automobile, whether it's racing or not, because it's a special thing.
And speaking of that, some people might not know that you used to work for Mazda, and you were one of the brainchilds behind the whole Mazda grassroots initiative and growing Mazda in what it is today in the motorsports side. Can you elaborate just a little bit on how all that went down?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Mike. It was because of council again. Gentleman who just recently passed, Ray Novotny, was a longtime council member, also a chief steward, a president of council. Ray owned Racine Volkswagen Mazda, which was a dealership in Racine, Wisconsin. And Ray raced Carmen Ghia, Volkswagen Beetle. He raced the VW Rabbit when those first came out. He raced the Scirocco, which is the car he had so much success in. And when the first Mazda RX-7s came to the States, my dad and I took a train from Chicago up to Racine, and Ray picked us up, and we were going there to actually buy a Mazda 626, which was 1979. It was a four-door. It actually had the same engine as the Ford Courier truck. It was aluminum block, blue head gaskets once a week. It was not the best, but so I'm 9 years old, and Dad and Ray and I go back to the dealership to do all the paperwork. And there's a chair in the dealership lobby or showroom. So Dad says, "You sit there." He and Ray go into the office to do all the paperwork. And sitting in the special spotlight position in the showroom is a white 79 RX-7, brand new. And I fell in love with Mazda. And we finished the paperwork on the 626, and out back in the service shop, Ray was already had taken a couple of RX-7s off the truck and was already putting a roll bar in one, a bright yellow one that he ran in showroom stock A at the time, and then went in D production. But in those days, it was showroom stock, bolt-in roll bar, fire extinguisher hose clamped to the roll bar, tape up the headlights and tail lights, and put belts in the stock seat, and you were going racing. And so I fell in love with Mazda, and my first boyhood dream was to work for Mazda and be in racing. And they had obviously so much success in IMSA throughout the 80s with the RX-7, and just met the right people at the right time. Got to fulfill my dream by ultimately becoming the director of motorsport at Mazda. And again, all because of a Midwest Council relationship that I fell in love with that brand, and did that for 17 years and got the opportunity now at IMSA thanks to Mr. France and Ed Bennett.
Yeah. Well, year 2 of managing the whole circus instead of a few elephants. So how does it feel? A little bit better off this time?
Yeah, it's interesting. That I appreciate that quote, Brandon. I always tried to explain to people that don't understand our sport. And I remember a guy named Ray Irwin used to own Blackhawk Farms. He and his brother Mike, on the back of Ray's trailer, he used to say, "It's a racing thing you wouldn't understand." And I always try to explain to people when I was going to college, my basketball teammates or people at church, what's this racing thing all about? And I would say, hey, I'm responsible for one particular element of the program, and it's this race team. And I then went back to them, and they heard about my new role at IMSA, and I said, yeah. So now instead of being part of the elephants, I'm part of the whole circus. It's been a great journey. So honored to have the role that I have now as a steward of the sport. Try to grow it in the same manner that I think Midwest Council is just a different level. I don't want to say it's better level than the other. I think the common thread is the same passion that is seen at Midwest Council weekends, whether it's an open trailer or the family tow vehicle or a transporter like Advanced Autosport shows up with a bunch of Miatas. It's the same passion. Maybe different budgets at the pro level, but it's the same. And battling through 2020 is my first year. The pandemic and all those things. It was just, again, about stepping back and trying to make good decisions with the information you had at the time. So everyone's like, oh my gosh, you had to face that, through your first year. Well, once again, it starts with people, and there's a very talented group of motorsport professionals at IMSA. We have great corporate partners. We have great OEMs, 18 OEMs running in IMSA. And then, of course, you got the event promoters at the racetracks that just everyone keeps their head down and focused on making sure we execute safe events and adapting and overcoming with the challenges of not being able to race and no fans and things like that.
Right. And that's one thing too that I was going to ask you about. Like, how is 2021 comparing to last year? Obviously, we're getting better. We're getting through all this, even from a club standpoint with council, with our, the Blackhawk event you went to. We still have to do certain mandates, but it doesn't feel like last year. It feels a little bit better. How's the IMSA Paddock handling all this for the first part of the year?
Super proud of the way that everybody adapted. We learned a lot. We obviously had all the safety protocols in place. A lot maybe different is the state to state mandates of going to events in Florida versus Ohio, like this coming weekend, or Wisconsin or California. Knew for sure in certain states you couldn't have fans last year. Now it's, to your point, Mike, starting to open up a little bit. I think there's a lot of efficiencies we learned. For example, maybe the number of days that we're on site at a race event can be shortened. We learned how to get the teams in more efficiently, get them unpacked, run practice, qualify, and race, and get them out of there. We learned that maybe you can run a couple of races each weekend. So our Michelin pilot teams ran a double header in Ohio last year. Maybe that's something we can think about for future years. This year we're having to not being able to go to Canada. We're having to run 2 events at Watkins Glen. So I think it brought everybody closer together in terms of decision making. A lot of my decisions, I'd like to think are done by consensus, trying to reach out to the teams, understanding their operational situation, understanding their feedback, our OEM partners. And that's a lot, again, back to those contest board meetings. It's everybody's input, trying to make the best decision. Again, not always agreeing with the person next to you, but trying to do the best thing for the sport. And that's how I'm going to try to continue to operate it. And boy, I hope we get back to normal soon. But until then, we're just going to keep focusing on doing it safely, making sure that all of our international competitors can get into the States. That probably, out of everything, was the biggest challenge, because 40% of the people that compete in IMSA or are mechanics or engineers or folks, they live outside the US. So getting all of those people into the States for all the events last year was probably the biggest challenge of them all.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, I remember when we were actually invited, and I would like you to go in this a little bit. We actually were support series for you last year at Road America, which was a very cool situation to have a club series be a support race for you. And part of that was part of COVID. And I remember you guys were, when we came in on Thursday, you had your own little section, and we had our section for protocols. How did all that come about to get us involved in a pro weekend, which I think was the first time ever? Maybe you know more history than I do. I don't know.
No, that's right. Outside of the Young Americans Grand Prix that took place at State Fair Park, which I'm so thrilled is still there by name. But we, as I said earlier, there's a business model related to our events, and when we go to these particular venues, the promoter has a business model. They sell tickets. They have sanctioning fees that they pay the series. We pay to have some of our single make championships run, like MX5 Cup or Porsche Carrera Cup or Lamborghini. And because of COVID, we were trying to shorten up the weekends, meaning less days on site for our people, less chance of spreading the virus. So in working with Mike Kircher at Road America, he said, boy, I'm selling a 4-day ticket. I need to have content for 4 days. And we also had a situation where, because of recasting the schedule, our NBC television window, a live TV window, was on Sunday morning from 11 to basically 1:40. Not ideal for Mike as a promoter to retain the fans. The day ends at 1:40, then what? So I thought literally for 5 minutes. And I said, Mike, let me make a couple calls. And I called Bruce Volbrecht and I called David Wessel and said, hey, what about a Midwest Council Spec Miata race? I knew SECA, I think, had a Spec Miata race in another venue that weekend. They said, wow, that would be great. Very short time. I think it was Friday night was the first calls. And by Sunday morning, we had a business plan in place of how that could work. I think they ran a test day on the Thursday. We allowed everybody to stay. And then, of course, Sunday afternoon, I felt horrible because the big rainstorm hit right before the Spec Miata race.
Yeah.
But
Rain likes to follow you around.
It does.
it does. But thank goodness, it all could be, and I hope maybe someday it can happen again. But, I said to the folks in the Spec Miata drivers meeting on Sunday morning, it was so special for me to have both ends of my involvement in the sport come together from council to now IMSA.
And Mazda.
Yeah.
They're all
and
Miatas.
Mazda. Yeah, exactly.
There's a trifecta there.
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
But-
you're talking about the meetings. Yeah, that emergency BOD meeting we had about that.
Oh yeah, I was there for that one.
But, again, that weekend is just, again, bigger transporters up in the IMSA paddock, but the same passion exists up there that exists for people in Midwest Council. I'll say that till the day is done.
Yeah,
Well,
we absolutely enjoyed it. It was a huge.
Yep.
Even if we'd lost money, it still would have been good because of the marketing. We had our tent down in there at the corner, and we had some race cars, and we had people come up and ask about us. And like I said, I think I talked to about 5 guys from the Minneapolis area that were all looking to build endurance cars because that event travels, and they didn't have anything nearby. And I was like, well, come on down to Blackhawk. It's only a 6-hour drive for you. So it didn't work out really well.
Yeah, no, it was a great weekend, and I was there for the first part of load-in and all the other registration, and then we came back Sunday with my son, and that was the first time my son really he's 8, so he's finally getting it, and he saw the Spec Miata, and that's what he wants to eventually race, and we and a lot of people, and Brandon can back me up on this, a lot of people did stay after the IMSA feature event.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
To watch Spec Miatas. So in the rain.
I pulled my car into turn 5 there and sat and watched the whole thing just by myself. It was a little sort of reminiscent. I first went to Road America when I was 6 weeks old to the June sprints. My parents had me there and right there in turn 5. And, it just it was really cool to be part of that and have you guys be part of that. And then, the idea that so growing up, of course, Blackhawk was the primary place that council raced. Almost every weekend was at Blackhawk. And then there'd be maybe 1 race or 2 races at State Fair Park. There would be 1 race at Groton over in Michigan. Autobahn, of course, didn't exist at that time in the 70s, 80s. But in 1979, the first time Midwest Council ever raced at Road America. There was over 400 entries from showroom stock to the Formula Fords. I mean, massive entries. It was the first time council ever ran there. And I remember that weekend like it was yesterday. And wow, to have council first race there, it was absolutely spectacular.
Oh yeah, that's what I tell people, because it's unfortunately not on our schedule this year, but there's other reasons. They have a massive, the Ryder Cup is there at the same time, and there's other reasons why. But we are planning on going back next year, and that's what I tell people. That's like our Indianapolis Motor Speedway, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's our holy grail.
Yeah.
So Road America, my son, whenever we get a chance to go up there, even Brandon, because he runs the autocross up there, even the go-kart track, any excuse to go up there, we have to go. So
yeah, it's an amazing facility for sure. What Bergenthes and now Mike Kircher and the board have done is reinvest in it. And I've always told people that never have come to a race, imagine going to a national park and there happens to be a racetrack, winding through it. But, the chance to go to Blackhawk a few weeks ago, I got to tell you, that was an emotional time. I hadn't been there, and shame on me, for 20 years, only because of my responsibilities in other sport, areas of the sport and around the world. But that place is really special, and there's so many elements of it that have stayed the same, but in a similar manner, what Paul Machute and staff there have done to invest in that facility, it looks terrific. The concession area, just the whole thing, it's really well done. And I can't wait, hopefully, to get some laps there in the not too distant future.
Oh yeah, no,
Beetle, huh?
that's right. So going back to that, and Paul's done a wonderful job, and Blackhawk is our home. As you can see, the schedule this year is very reminiscent of somebody it was in the past. And that'll always be that way. What, with the car that you're redesigning now, which was the based on your dune buggy, what's the time frame of that getting completed then? I don't, just curious as a racer.
hard to tell, really. But I think, the place where it first drove was Blackhawk, so it needs to drive there again the first time. Ultimately, it's all about, as you guys both know very well, time and money, of which I don't have a lot of either, to invest in running. But hopefully soon. I think it's more about getting it right and having it be authentic to the way it was. And with grandfather's midget now back in the family, that's pretty special. But it's so crazy to look at the pictures of those cars and realize how far safety has come as well. Geez Louise, again, I keep saying it, my dad was brave. All those guys running in Midwest Council were so brave. So hopefully in the next maybe year or 18 months. How's that? Is that a good time frame?
Oh, yes. And I hope you can come back on the podcast and let us know.
I hope so.
Brandon and I will make the announcement with you. How about that?
Exactly. We'll do a live show from
we go.
Our
it's so
finishing it in the garage.
Another thing about Midwest Council, and it was neat to see the driver school, and I think there was a young guy in a Spec Miata, teenager, going through school and things like that he may have aspirations of going to the next level and maybe going pro. The thing that I love so much also is the Larry Bests, the Wessels, the Bruce Volbricks, the Corky Art John, still there, that council was enough for them. And I mean that in a very positive way, that was their place in the sport. That was the level that they wanted to be and are still. And in a lot of ways, that is the same for me. I've had this crazy, amazing, and very blessed journey to go through Mazda from grassroots to the top levels and pro, and now to be part of IMSA. But council is enough. Like, that is enough of a dosage of passion and the ability and the opportunity to drive, to be a corner worker, to be a race official. It has everything that the highest levels of the sport have. There's maybe technology advancements in IMSA that are different, but in the end, it's the same. And, there were guys that Dad raced with, Rick Dittman, for example, is a guy that I've stayed in touch with, spoke to him just last Sunday, who ultimately wanted to go to the next level and went to the SCCA runoffs and went to SCCA Trans Am, and he ran an IMSA and won an IMSA race in the GT car. Those guys were folks that wanted to grow. But in the end, those days of starting in council, participating in council, learning in council, that has stuck with them in the same manner. And I think, it's maybe coming full circle for me to re-engage with council, but that's why I want to give back so much. But the experience that people can gain in driving and being taught proper car control at a council driver school. And as you point out, Mike, in autocross or HPDE or whatever it is, you can learn so much about yourself, about things you can apply to your street driving, accident avoidance, looking down the road. There's so many things that I know made me a better driver, and I'm sure you guys can relate. When it came time to get my driver's license, I already had sat through all those school sessions, and I understood a lot better than a lot of my classmates and at the high school level on what proper driving was supposed to be. So long-winded answer, but I think you guys know what I mean.
Yeah, no, we do. We have a few
Yeah.
teenagers who are members who had their racing licenses before their street license. So.
Exactly. Exactly.
And my son, he's going to be turning 9 here this month, and we actually put him in his go-kart for the first time today, out in Sugar Grove area.
Nice.
And my big thing is I want him to not be afraid of a car, because I'm seeing a lot of kids today afraid of cars. They'll Uber everywhere. They won't drive.
Totally.
I want him to be aware that you are in control and you can control it. And if you're taught correctly, you'll be fine. But it's amazing. Like Brandon and I grew up to where, like you said, our driver's licenses, it's almost like graduation day. You're getting it, and then you're hitting the town that night.
Oh, yeah. I had dreams. I had a little Bigfoot when I was 2 that I would just cruise around the yard till the battery died, and I had dreams of driving before I even got into a full-size car.
But some kids are different today, and I want my son I want him to be safe and go through all that. And racing teaches that. So
yeah, 100%. Both my kids, my youngest daughter hasn't done it yet, but I told them they're going to go. Autobahn Country Club has a teen driving experience. And my son went, and my daughter's going to go. But, I always told them, you're going to learn how to drive properly. And when you go out with your friends, I'd prefer if you did the driving, because I know then that you've been taught, again, accident avoidance and car control. If the car gets into a slide, what do you do, and things like that. So,
well, that's like, so going back as a parent, my mom did the same thing to me. I actually got my license after 16. My mom lived in Waukegan at Great Lakes at the Naval Station.
Okay.
And she learned how to drive in Chicago in the winter. And she goes, you're going to do the same thing. And so
there you go.
She goes, if you can drive through all this in the winter, even in the mid 90s, I was late bloomer when it came to all that, because she wanted me to drive in the worst conditions possible. So
That's cool.
I was like,
That's
okay. Cool. But yeah, so what other cars? So you had your dad's car, and then you got the Curtis Craft Midget from your grandfather. How did you come across finally getting that car?
Oh, that's crazy. So I was at the Rolex 24, sitting on the pit box. We're 2019, the Mazda program. We have the 2 DPI prototypes, and there's a period of time right before our sessions start where all the cars roll into pit lane. They're doing a course clearance lap. The teams are getting ready. And a lot of us, of course, who are focused on what's going to happen in the session also have our laptops up. And I'm literally checking my Mazda email. And a gentleman sent me an email saying, hey, Mr. Doonan, you don't know me, but I'm helping a woman sell a car which you used to own. And I in the time that I've been driving, I think I've owned 2 cars total, because in all the years at Mazda, part of our compensation was a demo. So I always had, we didn't own cars. And attached to this email is a picture of my grandfather's Curtis Craft Midget. And I used to sit in that car when I was a little boy in the back of the garage, pretending that I was Mario Andretti or Johnny Rutherford. And so I was just completely overwhelmed, and I wrote back immediately saying, yes, please, I'd love to see it. It was actually in Jacksonville, Florida, in the mezzanine level of this gentleman's building, who had passed away. And one of their family friends was helping sell off some of his cars, and in one way or another, ended up acquiring it, and it's now in Daytona Beach, and it's probably going to have some time at the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America. A good friend, George Levy, runs that, and he said, "Hey, what about bringing the midget over and letting kids, sit in it and get their picture taken after they've visited the museum?" And I thought, what a great idea to celebrate, like we've talked about, the sport, introduce, the next generation to the sport and maybe some of the history. So really excited about it and can't wait. I had developed a really close relationship with the late John Andretti. He and his son Jarrett drove for me back in 2012 in the Rolex 24, the only time they ever got to co-drive together. And I've stayed in touch with Jarrett, of course, and I asked Jarrett, when I get the midget running, would you drive it at, because I can't fit in it. It's I don't think any of the three of us can fit in this thing.
No, I can't.
Tiny. But maybe your son, Mike, after he's done.
Yeah.
But Jarrett has agreed to drive it. We're going to get it running, and a lot of the USAC events that happen now have usually an old timers event associated with them, especially here in Indianapolis, where I happen to be tonight. The Hoosier 100, usually they bring out the old cars for a demonstration. I said to Jarrett, I'd love for you to drive it. It would be really special. So that's the goal with that car, and hopefully can do that here in the not too distant future.
Oh yeah, I know Roy Carruthers has a vintage group right now, so that you could probably hook up with him as well, because he does.
Yeah, you
sprint
need
cars.
to introduce me to him.
I
think
do.
The Carruthers were also supporting Rich Vogler at the time when he was running. I was a big fan of Rich's because, of course, the Volkswagen Power connection.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's for what if you don't know that we were talking about earlier that Mr. Doonan and I actually lived in the same area, just many, many years apart, and so did a lot of racers. Mr. Doonan went to high school, was with Bobby Rahal.
Well, same high school.
Same high school.
I tease him because he was several years, about 10 years ahead of me. So, yeah, it was a bunch of racers in a small area.
Right. And then Rich Vogler, who was a USAC national championship driver, an IndyCar driver, went to the high school next to me as well, in Carroll Stream. So a lot of racers in the Wheaton, Carroll Stream, Glen Ellen, Winfield area. Apparently, yeah. Something in the
Think
water.
Of the talent. Look at the talent, Mike and I came out of this hotbed of motorsport. But
who would have thought? Now
yeah,
I know
exactly.
My mom's doctor was the next door neighbor to the Rahals.
Oh,
and
is that right?
She used to talk to Bobby's dad.
Yeah,
and
Mike.
The doctor used to always ask Mike, so how much did Bobby's racing cost you? And he would shake his head.
Yeah.
They want to know too
much. Yeah.
Because my mom would tell her what they were spending on my racing, and they would compare notes, and it's like, oh God.
That's exactly right.
But yeah, no, that's awesome, and it's great that you're keeping back with the Midwestern roots, with all of us here. Is there anything that let's see here. So is there any advice for any young people wanting to get in the sport outside, of course, they can be marshals at a certain age, like the children that come up through go-karts? Is there any advice for them, since you were a young person that came up through the sport, of what to do?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, racing teaches a certain discipline, and I don't mean racing as a discipline. I mean, racing teaches you discipline in preparation. Brandon's not going to run his Fiesta and before he's torqued the lugs, before he's checked his tire pressures, before he makes sure the hood is properly fat, any of those types of things. And of course we learn from mistakes. I've made them, we've all made them, but I think racing teaches you preparation and discipline in that manner. And so that's important. I think racing teaches overcoming adversity. I remember back to Midwest Council, I talked about those guys and gals that broke a certain part, and their fellow racers either gave them the part or helped them fix the car so they could get back out there. even if it meant losing to them on the results sheet. There's things that I learned then now in IMSA competition when I was running the Mazda program, or, we had a string of really bad luck that lasted 7 years. So that taught a lot of overcoming adversity. But, I think there's a lot, again, without sounding too sentimental or maybe a little corny, there's a lot that you can learn from facing adversity at the racetrack that you immediately apply to facing some of life's biggest challenges. And I know for sure that by the time I was high school age or college age, there were things I had learned at the racetrack about facing adversity, about organizing an event, about being prepared, about safety, flagging and communications and, fire and rescue. There were things I learned when I was 8, 9, 10 years old at a Midwest Council race that I could apply later or remembered later. And I think for those young people that get a taste of council, whether it's driving or working or participating in the events, there's so much that can be applied in real life, even though it's a hobby, so to speak. You can absolutely apply those things, and I know for a fact that I'm a better decision maker because of the time that I had in learning at Midwestern Council races.
Excellent. And you are very correct on Brandon with.
No, I was terribly unprepared for the first race.
The first race, he was
me.
terribly unprepared and caught himself. And I helped him with brakes and other things. And he's like, you know what? I'm just not feeling it today. So he was smart enough to say, okay, let's take a step back and let's regroup for next time.
Yeah.
So those are the little things you do learn, You
got to do. And the other thing is endurance. It's ironic that I have the opportunity now to steer the ship of an endurance championship because, life's an endurance. Each of the race weekends, it's endurance. And I think people have said it in driver school. I know you guys have heard it, but you slow down to go fast. You slow your thinking down in order to go fast. And I specifically remember, you guys will laugh, and I don't want to ramble on here, but in 1977, Midwest Council had its first endurance race. It was, 1978. It was at Blackhawk. In the fall. It was a 4-hour endurance race for showroom stock based cars. And I remember that vividly, that was kind of out of the norm, because most of the races were on a normal weekend, 30 minutes. And then at the end of the year, the long race were, 1 hour. North Suburban used to do a race called the Enduro, which is the same deal. But the whole thing, life's an endurance run, and so is what you can learn from the racetrack.
Excellent. So, with that being said, you have Mid-Ohio coming up this weekend. Anything new that you can tell us about? Because this is the longest break I can remember IMSA having in a while. So you had the Rolex and then Sebring, and then you're off for like 2 months, which also gave you the opportunity to come see us. So I'm glad that happened. But
exactly.
but what's going to be going on over in Ohio this weekend?
Normally we wouldn't have this break. Of course, we would have gone to Long Beach for the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. We would have gone to WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, but because of COVID, of course, we had to recast those events into September. So we'll go out there in the fall. But looking forward to getting back to the racetrack. Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course is a really special place, very technical for those who haven't been there. Looks like we're going to be blessed with beautiful weather. We'll have the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, the headliner on Sunday in a 2-hour, 40-minute race. Some great points races shaping up. Acura claimed victory at Rolex, Cadillac claimed victory at the 12 Hours of Sebring. So anybody's guess there. We'll have our LMP3 cars, and then we'll have our GT category with a huge variety. The Michelin Pilot Challenge will be there with our GS cars, which are based on GT4 spec, and then TCR in that 2-hour race on Saturday. We'll also have the MX5 Cup Championship. The Mazdas will be there. They put on some really good shows. And then in addition to that, we'll have our IMSA Prototype Challenge, which are LMP3 based prototypes that'll run an hour and 45-minute race. So lots of content for the fans in Central Ohio. Then we head to Belle Isle next, the streets of Belle Isle, and then up into Watkins Glen for a back-to-back weekend. So it's going to get awful busy here, even though we had a 60-day break. It's going to get really busy this weekend and on through the middle of November when we wrap it up at Motul Petit Le Mans at Michelin Raceway Road, Atlanta.
No, it sounds like it now. I have actually been spreading the word about NBC Peacock and your relationship with them. I even got Brandon to get the Peacock, and I like the service. And you can catch everything. I want to try to promote that too. You can catch all the IMSA action on Peacock, and it's nice.
Yeah, right now we're partnered with NBC in a big way. NBC broadcasts all of our races. NBCSN this year. We have the NBC Track Pass for 2021. We have some network. We'll have a couple network races. VIR in October will be a live television show, as well as segments of Petit Le Mans. And then, as you know, NBCSN is going to go away at the end of 21. So working with our partners at NBC and how the distribution works. But, IMSA.com is the place to visit to, know all of the broadcast times. And again, whether it's your mobile device or your television, you can see all the IMSA action pretty much live at all times. It's amazing to think back that, those Midwest Council races, you'd have to wait weeks to understand the results if you weren't there because it didn't exist. No broadcast, no social media. So you'd have to wait for the next edition of the Klaxon, which was the newsletter that happened to be distributing all the race results. So most of the time I was there, but if I had to miss one for some reason, I was dying to get to the mailbox to get the Klaxon to see who had done well.
Oh yeah, no, those were the days. I'm trying to bring it back a little bit in electronic form, as I'm sure you've seen. So.
I love it. Yep, and I'm so excited to participate with the group that wants to capture the history. I've actually been jotting down. We took a lot of notes in a meeting at Blackhawk there with Bruce and Larry, and we're going to develop an opportunity to try to, again, digitize some of those things, bring back the stories of the past. But as you and I talk, Mike, we want to talk about what got us to today, but what's the future look like, and how do we continue to grow council and make sure people understand that opportunity exists to both drive on the racetrack, but to be part of an organization that's really all about people. That's
very true. Very true. Well, thank you, John, for this interview with Brandon and I. It was a pleasure. And I do like, we talked about this earlier, John, I do like naming this the fireside chat to get you going. So
I like that.
We can make this.
There were a lot of bonfires at Blackhawk and at Plymouth Rock Campground in Elkhart Lake, or I guess in Plymouth officially, but right outside of Road America. And, again, there was a lot of competition on track, but it were those times off track where there was so much camaraderie and so much family atmosphere that made council so special, and I think still makes it special today. And I'm honored to have had the chance to chat with you guys, share some stories of yesterday and today, and I can't wait to get back to my next Midwest Council race.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Yep, no problem. Thank you. And we'll schedule something for maybe at the end of the year. So
I'd love that.
We can do a little recap with everything.
I'd love that, and hopefully I can see you guys in person again soon. And God bless all the the families out there battling through COVID, and hopefully you guys can have a good, successful event. I think Memorial Day is the next one, right?
Yep, we're racing Memorial Day. It's a 3-day race weekend. It is a sprint racing on Saturday with a nice, and as you know this, beer and pizza Saturday night.
There you go. There you go.
And some live entertainment. And we have a musical band coming. And then Sunday, sprint racing with enduro at the end, just an hour and a half. And then Mondays are HPDE with a high-speed autocross time trial component. So it's a full 3-day weekend of activity. I'm thinking of bringing a big screen TV for the pavilion. Maybe we can watch
Indy
Indianapolis.
500. Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
right. That's
There
right.
you
I
go.
used to have to do that in the early days before I started going to the 500, and then started going to the 500 when I was 7, and I've only missed one since then. So I try to make that a tradition every year.